Well, it's time for world politics, and all kinds of things are happening on the political landscape. I'll be talking about a couple of those things, and we'll bring up our guest who'll be talking about voting integrity and a number of other things with his company or a company that he is associated with, and all along those lines. So, definitely looking forward to that conversation. But first, let me get you to some of these political news, and we'll see if some of the panelists show up as well. But the Supreme Court has granted the GOP a bid to require citizenship proof for some Arizona voters. So they're saying that the Supreme Court has given partial victory to the GOP trying to enforce proof of citizenship to vote in that particular state. So that is something that is going on. And of course, that might even be part of our conversation as well. And it looks like uncommitted leaders begin a sit-in after Democrats denied their request for a speaking slot at the convention. So definitely there are some folks that are still having some protests going on there. I know there were some folks that were involved in even the Palestinian protests or anti-Israel protests, pro-Palestinian protests that were going on over there in Chicago. I think it was something like 55 arrests yesterday, and there were some arrests made the day before and maybe even the first day, if I am remembering correctly, and all along those lines. So definitely that's something that is politically going on as well. And Josh Shapiro has blasted Trump for calling him an overrated Jewish governor. So Trump apparently made that comment after Josh Shapiro had kind of gone in on him, because that's one of the things I was talking to my guest about is some of this tit and tat and back and forth conversations that's been going on the political landscape. We even heard Hakeem Jeffries making the comparison of that boyfriend that you can't get rid of. You know, you broke up with them and they just don't seem to want to go away, is the comparison he was making in his comparison of how Trump is perceived by some in the world and all along those lines. So it ought to be interesting to see what goes on in that way. Just like it ought to be interesting to find out if it's true that RFK is going to be dropping out of the race and possibly endorsing Trump, how that could impact races in Georgia, Arizona, and other places. Because they're saying, according to the Telegraph, that RFK supporters are more likely to back Trump than Harris if he drops out of the presidential race. So we're going to see if that's actually a true thing or if this is just him trying to generate some more interest in his run and all in that space. And speaking of the Supreme Court, as I did earlier, the Arkansas Supreme Court has effectively rejected an abortion amendment. So that's something going on in Arkansas. So the Arkansas Supreme Court denied a bid to get abortion measure on the ballot. So like I said, all kinds of things taking place. And of course, later on today, we will see and hear from Kamala Harris as she has gotten the nomination, just like her vice president has as well. But they have Mr. Walsh made his speech yesterday, and today will be Kamala Harris's turn. She's already had some of her family members, including her husband and others, already speak for her, but now she will get a chance to speak for herself. And one of the other things that's going on in that political landscape is that Governor Abbott is, according to the NBC, has sent no migrant buses from Texas to blue cities in July. So apparently Texas stopped busing migrants to Democratic cities in late June. At least that's what the reports are now and everything. And we'll see how this plays out in the political landscape as well, and whether that makes folks want to vote for one candidate or another candidate or not. But like I said, a lot of things going on. Even Oprah Winfrey, who said that she is an independent, came out and spoke at the convention on yesterday, and she said that decency and respect are on the ballot, and definitely it looks like she is trying to get some of the folks, both from the independent camp and maybe even some of the Republican camp, to support the candidate that apparently she is supporting, which is Kamala Harris, because she used the line of "Let us choose joy," and definitely there's a number of other big names that have been out there as well. But I'm going to bring in my guest today, see what he's got to say about a number of these things. As we do know, immigration is a big issue because apparently Trump is visiting the border to highlight immigration, as of course there are even some folks that are saying that he tanked the immigration bill that was bipartisan and all along those lines. Now, whether that's true or not, we're just going to find out with some more of this rhetoric and things that go on during the course of the conversation. So, like I said, sometimes it's hard to figure out who's telling the truth, what the truth is, and that's why they have fact checkers all the time in just about everything from social media to the TV stations themselves. But I'm going to bring in Christopher and see what he's got to say because I know he's got a company called, part of a company called Vote Right and all along those lines. So definitely glad to have Christopher Baum with me here and all along those lines. But what is your take? You know, I guess after today, we were joking about it earlier, we won't have to worry about the convention version of politics because it seems to me that in both cases, and we were talking about this on the World Edition earlier, they're just one big pep rally to get your side revved up and all along those lines. But now I guess they'll have a debate in September, and then folks will have to decide how they want to vote or who they want to vote for. And I know one of the things that's been constantly on people's minds is voter integrity. And I know from having talked to your boss when she was on the show and others that is something that Vote Right is all about. And of course, there have been things like ID checks that some people are fans of, some people are not fans of, and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your take on this and what exactly Vote Right is doing to make sure that we have a legitimate and wonderful kind of thing going on with fairness and all along those lines.
I am extremely happy to be here. It's nice to meet you virtually after watching your podcast for a while. So I'm pleased to be here, Mark. Um, and I want to be very clear about this. I am an officer for Vote Right. I am the chief compliance officer. Angelica, who you interviewed several weeks ago, she's the boss.
Right.
So, but when it comes to things like voter ID, um, who votes, who doesn't, that's not what our role is. Our role is to make sure that we provide the tools that election administrators need to follow the law and to make sure that every legitimate vote is counted and counted exactly one time. That's what we do. It is not up to us to interpret the law. It is not up to us to decide who is a voter and who isn't. We want to give the right tools and stay right down the middle of the aisle, make sure that everybody who comes out and casts their vote directly, it's counted and counted properly. And if that was easy, we would have solved these problems 250 years ago. It's not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Along those lines and everything, I was just wondering because I know one of the things that people have been talking about. We do have Sasha Starr who will be joining us, and he's over there in Canada, so they have a whole different voting system. But he has been following American politics and all along those lines. But I know sometimes, even on some of our past show, Sasha and others have been trying to figure out the electoral college. So, will Vote Right help with that system, or is it not even going to deal with that? Because I'm trying to remember what your boss answer was when we had her on, because I know a lot of people are going like, should the popular vote be what counts, and that it's one man, one vote, and that that's who is the winner? But I think that if I've looked at statistics, there have been several elections where the popular vote is not who won because of the electoral college. So I was just wondering how is Vote Right dealing with that, or does it even matter, or are you just trying to make sure that everybody is out there getting their proper vote, no matter whether they are going into the electoral college system or that old notion of one man, one vote?
That we are very much about making sure that every person's vote is counted. How that is applied is up to Congress and the state legislatures. That is not our department. We do not get involved. We just want to make sure that they have the tools that they need to count the votes. And that's what we're good at, and we are very good at it. But that's where we say other people make those decisions. We just give them the tools to do it right.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything. I know that there have been a couple of other companies, not your company, but others that had gotten in trouble because of the way that they had their systems done, and I can't even think of the names of them. I think Dominion might be one of them and everything.
Dominion, Hart, InterCivic, Sequoia, but generally it's not the systems. it's whatever processes are put around the systems. You can run a good election on just about any system if you've got the procedures in place. You can run a bad election on just about any system, except ours, of course, but just about any other system. You can run a bad election on. It's what is surrounding it in terms of the processes. And there's something I want to bring up early in this discussion with you, Mark, and that is every legitimate voter actually votes in every election, but they do it either directly or indirectly. Now, you do it directly by showing up. You cast your vote. You pick the the candidates that you want to win. You mark that on your ballot. You take a look at whatever other issues are on the ballot, and you make your choice. And that's how you do it directly. But if you do not show up, you are still voting, but you're voting indirectly now. If you do not show up, you are voting automatically for the candidate that you like least, and your position on whatever propositions are on the ballot that you like the least. So if you don't show up, that's how you're voting. And people don't always make that connection.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Along those same lines, we've talked about it on this show and other shows, because Adam Lambarello, who's been here before, talks about the notion of having an informed electorate. So I know that I've even mentioned the fact that a lot of times people will go according to whatever the interest group is. Like here in Durham, North Carolina, there are political action committees, and of course there are groups like Sierra Club and a number of others that will sometimes give you an idea of where the issues are and where the candidates stand on those issues and who they endorse. And some people, just by the nature of humanity, are lazy and will vote according to what those suggestions are. So just wondering your thoughts around that, and is Vote Right got any ways of maybe having some guardrails for that? Because I know that's something that Adam talks about, is this notion, because he jokes about the notion that maybe not everybody needs to vote if they don't have the intellect to understand what they are voting for. I think he's sometimes being a little bit sarcastic when he makes that remark, and he's not here to defend himself, but he's made something to that effect and everything. But I'm just wondering your thoughts around this notion of having an informed electorate.
One of the things that we believe in is that people need to have access to the information. And personally, I believe, and I want to make sure that I'm clear about this, I am speaking personally now and not for the company.
Right.
I believe that we can't afford to ignore our geniuses. But how much you are a genius depends on more about where you're standing at the time than anything else. So if you put me in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa and tell me you make sure that the pH in the water is right for this corn, I am an idiot. Okay? So we have to listen to our geniuses, but we also have to have the information available to make informed decisions. And that means, to me, listening to more than one source. If you are listening to just one group of people, the odds are you're not getting the whole story. The days of balanced news are not over, but a lot of people don't choose to listen to balanced news. They listen to one side or the other, and you get a feedback. And it doesn't matter if it's left feedback or right feedback. If you're not taking the time to look at the issues, you're going to make your choices. But whatever those choices are, again, that's not our job to influence. We work to give the election administrators the tools to complete their duties as stewards of the will of the American people. And that's an important concept also. You hear sometimes election officials say things like, well, that person's not a voter unless I say they're a voter. No. Whether or not that person is a voter is not subject to interpretation. It is a subject of law. The law determines when a person is a voter or a person is not a voter.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense and everything. Along those lines, because I've got some friends, and I'm going to bring in Sasha Starr, I think Nick Palveda, who's one of the founders of the networks. And I know Kim's popped in a couple of times to see if he was around and everything along those lines. So maybe she'll pop back in a second. But I was just wondering what got you into this notion of wanting to work with VoteWriter or this particular voting company. I've got friends that have canvassed and done other kinds of work in the political landscape and all along those lines, and some of them are almost born into politics. Their parents and others were into politics, and others came into it through the back door, whether that was through college activism or other kinds of things. But what got you interested in wanting to work for Vote Right and also just in being engaged in politics in general in this way?
Well, I need to give you a little bit of my background then. My background is actually in information systems. I sort of fell in love with computers back in the late 70s. I worked for one of the early computer stores in Los Angeles in a town called Brentwood. And if you're not familiar with Brentwood, the people who can't afford to live in Brentwood live in Beverly Hills.
Yeah,
I did not live anywhere close to there, but I did get the privilege of working there for a company called the Byte Shop Brentwood, one of the early computer stores, and we sold things like Apple IIs and Commodores and the Atari systems way back in the 70s. I was privileged to work with clients like George Carlin and Bob Newhart and people like that. So that was kind of cool. But I developed my interest in technology. I ended up coming back to New Jersey, where my wife and I both had family after we spent time in California, and we spent a number of years in Texas. I was recruited by a company called Data Pro, came back to New Jersey and started covering technology from the analysis side. Data Pro was acquired by Gartner, and I started to look at the use of technology in government at that point. We're talking now the mid 90s to the late 90s, and specifically looking at the effects that Y2K was going to have on government systems. One of the things that I noticed was, gee, we got an awful lot of old voting systems out there. And I started writing about problems that we were going to have in the elections. And then the election happened in 2000, Bush versus Gore. You guys remember the hanging chads down in Florida? I've got one of those voting centers in my basement. And from there, I got to work with the state of Arizona and the state of Delaware, the state of New York. I worked as a consultant for the Board of Elections in the city of New York for a number of years, helping them select their next generation. I was privileged to testify in front of the House of Representatives Administration Committee in support of the Help America Vote Act, and continued to work in voting systems throughout the years. And I was actually recruited by VoteRight when they started to bring their system to the market to help them navigate the technical issues and compliance. And that's how I ended up here and get to work with a great group of people here in VoteRight, bringing some beyond state-of-the-art technology to solve this problem and make sure that these votes are counted properly.
That makes sense, everything. And then we got the gentleman from Vote Right. I know we had his boss on sometime back on World Edition, but any thoughts about the voter integrity or just in general, or any questions for our guests today and everything on world politics? It seems like voting is going to be a very important thing. And of course, we want to make sure that everybody is out voting. I don't know that we've ever, well, I think we've maybe crossed around, have we gotten over 50% yet of the people voting? Because I know that there's always been this dream of 75 to 100%, and I know we're nowhere near that, but maybe Chris has got some ideas as to the percentage of people that are voting. I know it's been, I think, going up because there was a big boost during the last run with Biden, and I think there was a boost with Obama, maybe even with Trump and a couple of others as well. But are we seeing enough of our public voting? So that's my question for Chris, and if you got any follow-up questions, but are we seeing enough people voting?
Well, no, there aren't. And it's even worse during the primary season, where you see exceptionally low turnouts. And that lack of engagement, I think, helps drive the political divide, because it tends to be the people who are more extreme that come out to the primaries, and that's who the candidates have to win over to get to the general election. So when you don't have the mainstream voters participating in the primary, um, you tend to get more extremist candidates.
I'm not really a subject matter expert when it comes to voting and how the system actually works. My understanding, though, is that the federal elections and the voting booths are administered by the state. And would that be correct, Christopher?
That is correct, and that's a matter of constitutional law. The federal regulations about voting systems tend to be about inclusivity and not about the actual design of the systems themselves. The Help America Vote Act created the Election Assistance Commission, the EAC, but the guidelines that they publish they're guidelines. They are not regulations. States are free to adopt them or not, or adapt them or not. Voting is run primarily at the state level and also at the county level, depending on the state.
Right. So when it comes to eligibility, would the eligibility of a person to vote be based on state law? Would that be correct?
That's a little bit more complicated. Basically, the federal regulations don't state when there has to be voters. It states that if there are voters, these groups of people cannot be excluded.
Okay. All right. Now, when it comes to the election that took place, that there was allegations of irregularities by one of the candidates who I believe lost in the election. These were allegations. Was there any evidence produced in front of a court that the court ruled that there was actually irregularities or illegal people voting, or was all this just mere allegations? Or to your knowledge?
I have been, now understand, I am not a lawyer, so I can't give actual legal advice, but I have followed these cases closely across the nation, and I have not ever seen any case about large-scale election manipulation won. Every case has been lost or tossed out. So
right.
I have not seen any actual evidence of election fraud, and I've seen lots of counter evidence that it did not occur.
So would you say that the overall argument that the elections were stolen is basically incorrect?
I would personally support that conclusion. I have not seen any evidence, nor is it my personal belief that the election was stolen.
Yeah, and that would be my
quickly,
I saw no credible evidence whatsoever presented before any court of law in the United States that even indicated that there were substantial irregularities. Now, granted, in any election, just like any vaccine, there could be one or two people, a de minimis amount, that broke through the system and did something irregular. But when we're talking about millions and millions of votes, which this person lost the election on, there wasn't any, and no court of law has ever, to my knowledge, indicated there was. So how does one benefit? How does a party and a individual benefit by creating disruption to a system that works, Counselor? Christopher.
I really, that's outside of our purview. We're not here to discuss that from the technology level. I can tell you that the technologies work. I can tell you that any technology can be applied or misapplied. I have not ever seen any evidence that the technology was misapplied on a large scale basis. As to why would one claim that that's not true? Because typically it's the winners that make the rules, and so the loser may want to try and change that dynamic.
Mhm.
Hey, Chris,
Okay.
just really quickly along those same lines, because another thing that was accused during the various elections, and you kind of alluded to it with the hanging chads and everything, but we definitely heard it in the last couple of elections. Is there any danger in your mind, and from the company standpoint, of foreign interference? Because we have definitely heard about the possibility of China and definitely even Russia interfering with elections. So, how do y'all guard against that, or do you even put that in the equation and everything? So that is something that I know some people have talked about, and even as a technological company, which is what VoteRight is there ways that y'all have safeguards to make sure that foreign adversaries don't manipulate the system?
Our system is designed so that they aren't networked. We use this process called air gapping, which means that the system that you vote on, if it's a VoteRight or a Titan LT2100 system, doesn't get connected to a network ever. It's a standalone system, and the ballots are applied through the use of a secure memory device that is checked before it is programmed. It's checked after it's programmed, and it has to meet certain electronic signatures to be introduced to the system, and it has to be introduced physically to the system. You can't do it over a network. It's got to be plugged in. So that completely, at least in our system's case, makes it impossible to, remotely access and hack our systems because we keep that air gap.
Yeah, but just really quickly, and then Sasha and Toby may have questions as well. The other thing I was curious about is if we go back in time to like the 60s and everything, there was this notion of, because you mentioned states having different rules according to where they are. And that became an issue even in the 60s because a number of people would have rules that would target a certain group, like the African American population or other
Right.
populations, and all along those lines. So, is there ways that your program is able to stop things like that from happening? Because if it's state by state, then Mississippi may have different rules than say New York, than say California. So how
Well,
do you deal
we,
with
we
those?
saw we saw an example of that in Arizona today. Today, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled that in certain cases you have to provide proof of citizenship. That that could, under certain circumstances, disenfranchise certain people. But again, that's not VoteRight's job. That's why you have a legislature. That's why you've got a court system. If people don't agree with the way that that Arizona is letting people vote, there are ways to address that. That's not our job. Our job is to help the people who are running the elections, give them the tools to run the elections themselves in accordance with the law of that jurisdiction.
Do you think there's any possibility, because we mentioned it with your boss, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, just your own personal one. Is there any possibility that we will go to all electronic voting at some point? Because I know a lot of people have theorized that they would like to be able to either have same day voting for everybody, or to have voting combos like you would have if you were doing one of these reality shows like America's Got Talent or something.
Well,
like
exactly.
that.
That technology exists now. We actually offer that as an option. If you wanted to have a public election right now using VoteRight's online system, we can do that for you. And people use online voting all the time. They don't generally call it that. Every time you fill out a satisfaction survey for Chick-fil-A to get that extra sandwich, that's online voting. Every time that you want to choose your favorite contestant on America's Got Talent, that's online voting. So people do that now. And we have run online elections for organizations like unions, homeowners associations, school boards. We have the technology to do those kinds of things right now. What is missing at this point is public acceptance of that. I think we're going to get there because of the three of you, how many use online banking?
Yep, I do.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So we've got 3/4 of us using online systems now. How many have bought movie tickets online? Picked out your favorite location for a Taylor Swift concert. Um, all of those technologies are in place right now. If you're going to encrypt your credit card and save that information online, unless you want to go back to, even before the time where we were using checks to only paying for things with currency, you've already demonstrated faith in the system. Now, there are some people who only pay for stuff with cash. That exists. But they're missing 90% of the marketplace now.
Yep. South George, you told me the questions for the gentleman with vote right and just about the political ways that they're trying to make sure that everybody's getting their vote out.
Well, I can say that in Canada, it's a very old-fashioned way that we are voting. And, for example, I live in a county north of Toronto. So the voting officials, they are arriving right into my building. They set up their facilities there. You're arriving whatever time you want to do during the day of the election. And all you have to do is supply a document like driver's license or something to just identify yourself.
That depends on the jurisdiction. In a lot of cases,
Probably.
you just have to sign the poll book.
I see. No, actually, you have to do both. I signed the poll book and I produce also ID, and then I vote and leave.
Right.
That's about it.
Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to see if you could speak a little to the mail-in voting system and how secure and how that can be, because I know a lot of people are that's being demonized now.
Well, yeah. Again, it depends on the jurisdiction, depends on where you are. Some people hate it, some people love it, and some people it's the most secure system because it's in the hands of the U.S. federal government, and in some people it's the worst voting system because it's in the hands of the U.S. federal government. So it depends a lot on which side of that fence. The two parts of that is how do you and when do you count those ballots? If you are using a ballot tabulating system, are you able to read those ballots when they've got the folds in them is one of the issues that comes up. When is it received? What happens if you have a delay due to weather or mechanical failure of a postal service truck? Is receiving it by Federal Express or personal carrier the same as receiving it from the U.S. mail? There are a lot of logistical issues that are involved, and those tend to be the points of the law. What happens if somebody votes by mail and then comes in and votes by person? How do you check that? When do you count those votes for precisely that reason? And if they do it accidentally or purposefully, which one of those votes counts? And does the fact that they tried to do it twice constitute fraud?
How does vote right deal with provisional voting? Because I know that that's something that people do quite often. Sometimes it's those mail-in votes that both of you are talking about as well. And also, are y'all very hands-on? Because I do know that a lot of times there are groups in voting security systems that literally have to be there at the Board of Election and to make sure that their machines are properly maintained and properly done, because not everybody is trained in these different systems. I doubt everybody's trained in vote right unless y'all take them through the training. So how hands-on are you, and also how do y'all deal with the provisional votes? I know that's two questions.
Okay, well, let's do the provisional votes first. Typically, the provisional votes are done on paper, not electronically, and then they are sealed, and the provisional nature is determined after Election Day. So that's how provisional votes are usually handled. They're not generally done electronically. In terms of how hands-on we are, however much the client needs. Again, our systems are based on off-the-shelf technology. It's essentially a Windows-based system. Now, all the things that you don't need to run the voting system have been stripped out of the operating system. So you can't plug other devices into it. The ports on the system are covered. So there is no, for example, there is no network connector. It's not there, so there's nothing to plug into. The ability to plug certain devices like a printer exists, but you can't use that port to do anything else because the services for it have been stripped from the system. So if people want to watch how it works, let them. On our system, that's not an issue because to program our system requires physical access to it. You've got to plug the correct device into the correct spot. And doing that in full public is a great idea.
How widespread do you think this system will be eventually? Because imagine how many states are y'all in currently out of the 50 states, and are you hoping to be in all 50? And how competitive is the market? Like I said, I was aware. Like I said, I think that company is Dominion, if I'm remembering the name correctly. But there are, like you said, a couple of them, and all along those lines. But how competitive is the market, and how much of that market have y'all saturated yourselves so far?
The amount of the market that we have saturated in public elections lies far too close to zero for my taste. There is very extensive processes that you have to go through for certification, and we haven't made it through that at the federal level or for several of the states. Some of the states don't require that at all. We have been demonstrating in those states. So, but in the private market, unions, elections, co-ops, that kind of thing, we have been more successful at this point, and we're transitioning that success now to the public marketplace. How extensive can we be? We can grow with the system. As I said, it's standard off-the-shelf technology. There is nothing inherent in the hardware that is different. There are changes to the software, but that is gold sealed. So you load all the same software on all the same systems. You know, every computer, every one of the vote right systems within a jurisdiction, the software is going to be exactly the same. So you can go to that system before the election and say, yeah, that's the right system. You can go collect the information off of it for the voting, and then check the software again and say, yeah, that's the same system, because you know it hasn't been able to be changed any time in between. Consequently, the results that you get, and we do triple backups on that system. The voter can have a paper that they verify, and it says at the bottom that it's been verified by the voter. We keep an image of that vote, basically a PDF, as well as the electric count, and those are encrypted. So you can tie those three things together with a random number that is so big that if everybody on the planet voted 1,000 times on the same day, you'd still have a 1 in a million chance of one of those numbers matching.
Oh, wow.
So we don't have an issue there. Consequently, we can tie those three copies together to verify, yeah, this ties to this, ties to this. If you want to do a hand audit, absolutely. Count them. And we can show that they tie together.
Along those same lines, anything, how difficult is it to get the system into the different cities and everything? Because you kind of alluded to that earlier. So do you have to go before the city council, or do you have to go before the board of elections, or how do you get them into the various municipalities? Because many places are state run, but then you've also got different ones that are municipalities as well. So how do you target the people that you're going, and you have to do a lot of lobbying to the various local and state and maybe even national politicians in order to get your system in there?
I would not use the word lobbying.
Okay.
We have to do a lot of explaining. Okay. A little bit different process. We're not trying to influence the decision other than provide facts about our system and why our system is superior. And yeah, there's a lot of hands-on, there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of demonstration that goes along with that. But since our system is secure, since it is affordable, since it is portable, and this is something really cool about our system. You can use the same system in a voting site and handle the standard voter, any voter that has an accessibility issue. We can do voice, we can do multiple languages, we can change the size of the font for people who have difficulty seeing, change the contrast, all under control of the voter. So they can vote any way they want. Even if somebody can't get out of their car and curbside voting is allowed in that jurisdiction, our system has a battery that will last 2 hours. So you can put it on an ADA cart, take it out to the car, and they can vote securely from their vehicle.
I think you may have answered this, but is it also got accessibility points? So if somebody is blind or has other
Absolutely.
capabilities, how are they able to vote using your system?
And our the president, Angelica Kapsis, is a strong advocate for those that have accessibility issues. Plus, we can handle, I think we're at 24 different languages right now, both written and through audio. So we have, and that number continues to grow. So using the same system, you can address all of those needs. You don't have to have a different system set aside for the people who need wheelchair access. You don't have to have a system set aside for the people who don't read or can't read well or are blind or have different difficulty seeing small letters. We can change the font size. If they're using the audio voting, they can change the speed so they can hear it faster if they're comfortable with that, or hear it slower if they're comfortable with that. We have all of those accommodations built into the same system. We seem to have lost Mark. There he is.
We can do something else really quickly and everything. Just really quickly because we only got a few more minutes to go, but I've definitely been fascinated by this and everything. But we do have later on this evening where we got the Coco McMillan show, but I don't know if Sasha or Jacoby have any thoughts about that. And if you want to jump in, you can as well, Chris, about the closeout of the DNC later on today and everything, since it is world politics. And I know some of our listeners may want our thoughts. Like I said, it's been one big party, so I'm expecting it's going to be a party again because I think Pink is going to open up for Kamala and everything. But what is our take on what's going to happen in day 4 of this particular convention? Because this will wrap it up, and then we'll get gear up for 1, maybe 2 debates, maybe 3. Well, we also got the vice presidential debate and everything. But what is your takes, gentlemen, on what we can expect in day 4, the closing day of the DNC?
Well, what I'd like to say about the debates is I'm really glad I live just outside of Philadelphia and not inside Philadelphia on September the 10th.
That makes a lot of sense. I can definitely understand that because there will probably be all kinds of protests just like they've been in Chicago and everything.
Just not dealing with the traffic is enough for me.
Right. That makes sense. I can definitely understand that. Jacoby and Sasha, what's your take on what's going on? Because it will be coming up to close out. I think they're probably already started already.
I think they start at 6, but I think it should be a good closeout. I mean, it's been just a party. I mean, it's been really fun to watch. It's something unique, and it's definitely it's something new. It really is. we're used to the traditional old. We do a couple of speeches. We have a choir or somebody come up and sing. Or I mean, it's just it's very nice and refreshing to see something different than we have in the past, and it feels nice. So I'm sure they're going to close it out well, just as the show has been going before, or the prior days have gone well before. I'm sure the speech at the end will be just like Tim Wall's speech last night, very rousing and to get everybody excited. And it'll be it's a closeout. It's been a joyous thing, as the theme yesterday was. So like I said, it's been very refreshing. In terms of the debates, I'm glad there are two debates, one with the presidential, one with the vice president. Um, I doubt there'll be any more debates. There was never really, I mean, there was only one that was left on the books anyway, and that was the one agreed with. All the other chatter about, well, Kamala Harris backed out of the Fox News. There was never a Fox News debate. Never. Uh, Trump had planned that with Fox and put out this rumor, but there was never one in the books. So I think it's going to be interesting and exciting to see, because right now they've set the stage to there is definitely a stark contrast between the visions of the future, the pathways each party is going down, the top of the ticket is completely different on both ends, in every way. So I'm curious to see how the nation accepts, and will they, which way we're going to go.
Speaking about the future, I don't believe that Trump offers any picture about the future except the document, Project 2025, um, which doesn't paint a very exciting future, by the way. And yesterday it was very well documented by one of the speakers. I'm also quite impressed by the bench of Democrats, where they have so many bright people who address the convention. I was impressed by Oprah Winfrey, who emphasized that she is an independent. She is registered as independent, and yet she was proposing that she and asked everybody to vote for Kamala Harris. There were several Republicans, including mayors, who were also on the floor and explaining why they were going to vote for Kamala Harris, and asked their constituencies to do the same. So today's the last days. So far, it was a really great show. And that's what it has to be, as a show. Forget about the agenda, the plans, all the documentation, the economic plans. I have a feel that most people, they are not interested in the plans and economic plans and agenda and so on. They vote about what they feel, what they see, what they hear. And that convention is definitely showing that Kamala Harris will be accepted by a majority Americans as their next president. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Chris, maybe Jacoby's got some thoughts of this as well. It popped in my head earlier today. Is there any possibility, because Oprah popped out there yesterday, and I didn't know that Pink is going to appear before Kamala Harris and everything, but is there any possibility that the Gen Z Trump card will get played today and everything, and Taylor Swift will come out and make an endorsement or an appearance this evening and all along those lines? Because well, maybe she's overseas, but is there any possibility that Taylor Swift, because she hasn't come out like she did last year, will pop into the convention and make a grand appearance to get those young votes out? Any thoughts around that, Jacoby? I know you follow a lot around the young folks.
I mean, there's still rumors that Beyonce may come in. That's another a big a big deal. Taylor Swift may pop in a video, but you've got Pink, and Pink is huge too. I mean, it's Pink is hitting a demographic that Taylor Swift can't. And I think, having Pink there is huge. Taylor Swift may, but yeah, to your point, yeah, Taylor Swift may, but I think she may do it on her own time. And if she does, she does. And that's still a demographic that is probably younger than that voting block. That's why I think Pink is more important. Beyonce is more important than Taylor Swift at the moment. I think Pink, just because, again, that voting demographic is in that Pink range and in that Beyonce range.
Yeah, and just really quickly, I don't know what I'm saying, Lance, Chris, because we've been talking about this on this show and other shows. When y'all have done voting, and you've mentioned that it's not always been just regular voting like what we see with municipal elections, but also I imagine y'all have done polls, maybe even entertainment polls and that and everything. And I do know that it seems like our young people are becoming more engaged. Maybe they have an understanding of what they're being engaged in. Maybe they don't. But I was just wondering if y'all use your technology to kind of monitor things like the Ukraine war or the Israel situation or even Somalia and some of the other things that are going on, and even climate change, but issues that our kids seem to be engaged in. I don't have any kids, but I do have nephews. But I was just wondering, are you seeing that folks are using your technology in order to let folks know where they stand on certain issues?
We have not at this point been running public opinion polls based on our technology. Again, we would be very happy to support any of your clients that would like to do that, but that's not our place in the spectrum. We provide technology, and we want to make sure that as messengers that we deliver that message accurately, whatever the message is.
Along those same lines, I know there's some people, because we've had conversations about AI. Toby's had it. Steve, who's sometimes here, has had it as well. How concerned do you find people are about technology having too much of a say in our business, whether that's around voting or whether that's around running our food systems and other things? So as y'all are in that technology space, how concerned are people when you mention what's going on, that they have a fear about it? Or is there a fear that you're seeing, or no fear?
Well, I mean, to gauge the fear of technology, you go back to Colossus the Forbin project in the 60s. You go back to war games in the 80s. Yes, there's a fear there, and it's a healthy fear. But that is what needs to happen in order to have temper. So we can design systems like our systems that are appropriate use of the technology without abandoning the technology. So you can use it in a positive, constructive way to make sure that the decisions are counted accurately. Yeah, there are concerns. There are concerns about foreign government interference, AI interference, but that is not in the voting technology, that is in the messaging. Okay, so when you have AI celebrities that are appearing to endorse people that the actual celebrity isn't endorsing, that's the kind of interference that we need to watch for. It's not so much the interference of the voting systems themselves.
That makes a lot of sense, but we're going to wrap up. We've got to wrap up with a few minutes early and everything, because I've got to do another show, and usually Nick and them would be here to help me out with that and all along those lines. But before we get out of here, you've got about a minute or two, Chris, if you can tell people how they can reach you and maybe even reach the Vote Right office, and any last words that you want to share with our audience here on World Politics. And we'll be back with more World Politics on Tuesday, and we'll have World Edition tomorrow and everything. But anything that you would like to share about how you can be reached and contacted and how y'all can be found?
You can reach me personally at chbaum, B-A-U-M, Bravo Alpha Uniform Mike, like it says on the screen, at voteright.com. That's VOTRITE.com. You can also reach me through our website, www.voteright.com. And that's really the best way. The one message that I want to emphasize is what we started with, whether or not you choose to do it directly, you are voting in this upcoming election. Please make a choice, and please make that choice directly.
Yep. Great message, great, powerful message that we all need to do our civic duty and get that vote out there. And all along those lines, which is what it seems to be, you're saying is that we all need to exercise that civic duty and go ahead and vote our conscience, whatever that conscience may be, and everything. So I appreciate you, Chris. Hopefully, glad to have your boss on early, and hopefully we'll see you on some other shows in the not too distant future. But it's been
that would be my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I would love to come back.
Sounds good. Well, we'll see y'all later on, and I'll see these two gentlemen on World Edition tomorrow. But right now, we're going to get out of here. And we've got Coco McMillan talking music and entertainment at about the 6 o'clock hour. So I've got to get ready to get on over there. But we'll wrap up right here. So I'll catch both of you. I'll catch all three of you gentlemen later, and we'll be back with more programming right here on Pod TV.